welcome to my video. This is going to be a demonstration on how to make miso. First of all, we're going to start with the ingredients. When you make miso, you can make it with different beans, but what I chose today is soybean, kosher salt, of course, koji. We need to use a non-iodized salt to make miso, because otherwise it's going to kill the bacteria. So we want to start by placing your beans in a big container where you're going to be able to sift and check for rocks and beans that look bad, and then you can rinse them at least 2 times to remove the dust. At the same time, you can keep checking for rocks and discolored beans or overly dry, wrinkled beans, so you want to discard those. Give them a last little rinse and then fill the container up to the rim with water. I had to use 2 containers for this. Once they've soaked for 4 hours to 12 hours, you'll notice they double in size, so you can drain them and give them a rinse. And then you can place them in a pressure cooker to cook for 10 minutes. This is a timing for soybeans, so on high for 10 minutes, followed by a 20 minutes of natural release. But 20 minutes natural release, and then after that you can do a rapid release. Otherwise, you can also cook them in a pot, a classic way. Soybeans take a long time, so that's why I went with the pressure cooker. So it would be, something like 3 hours on the stove, so it's a bit too long for me. But different beans take less time, so if you want to use yellow split peas or garbanzo beans, it might be a little bit faster. So you want to cook them until they are fully cooked but not mushy, and you really want to make sure they're actually cooked and not undercooked, so you can taste them and see, but you don't need to add any salt in there. So once they're cooked, you drain them, you keep some of the liquid because we might need some in the following steps, but you really don't need that much. And then you'll transfer them to a robot, a mixer, or a blender that allows you to turn the beans into a coarse chop, like a kind of a semolina type size, or rice kind of type size of beans. You can also use a potato masher for this, but we don't want to go to a hummus. That's not what we're doing right now. It's okay if it's still coarse, so I'll be showing you the texture of that. And it's even okay if you have some beans that are whole. Honestly, I've never had any issue with that. I've been miso before, and I had beans that were not, even cut, and it turned out just fine. Because you can always blend it once the fermentation is over, and if you want to have a really smooth one, you can do that after too. It really is not a problem at all. If it doesn't blend very well, you can add a bit of liquid, but you really want to go only 1 tablespoon at a time, because you can add, but you cannot remove liquid, so you want to be a bit careful about this. So just a tiny bit of water to help your mixer, but honestly you don't need a lot at all. And once it's blended to the desired coarseness, then you can transfer it all in a bowl. And for me, I had so much of it, I had, you'll see in the future, but I ended up needing 2 bowls, so you want to have enough space to be able to mix things properly without spilling all over. You want to do this with the rest of the beans as well. This is about the texture that we're looking for. It's still kind of coarse, right? But it's totally fine. That's what we need. And yes, we need to measure the weight of the cooked beans, and then you'll use that to do a calculation of the weight of salt that you're going to need as well. So if your beans weighted 3 kilos, you're going to want to add, between 6.6% and 10% of that weight in salt. And that's to make sure that we have enough salt to prevent the spoilage of the miso. So it's important to calculate that. And so I needed 2 bowls because at this point I wasn't going to be able to mix properly, so I ended up dividing my koji and my salt and my beans in 2 different bowls. You want to make sure that you divide that equally so that the salt is well distributed throughout the miso. Again, it's to help prevent spoilage. Also the koji, of course. The koji needs to be distributed evenly as well. So once you're at this step, don't be shy. You can use your hands, wash them of course before you do that, or you can also use gloves. It's totally fine. I just went with my hands because I'm just used to that. And then I just made sure I had enough koji on both bowls, and then I was able to just start mixing. And at this point you're also going to notice if it's very, very dry, you can add a tablespoon at a time of the same cooking liquid that we had before. That's because we want to make sure that the miso isn't crumbling when you try to form a ball. It's just like if you were making a pie dough, sometimes it's too crumbly, you need to add a bit more water. It's the same concept. You don't want to get it to a point where it is so liquidy that it becomes very sticky or that it oozes when you form a ball in your hand. You still want it to basically you want to avoid having too much water because again, water will increase the risks of spoilage, but also it's gonna form, you can have a liquid form on top of your miso, which is not bad, it's tamari, right? But that's not what we're looking for when we're making this recipe. We're really looking to make miso, so we want to have a just enough that the salt ratio maintains the percentage that we wanted, and also that it just does not ooze liquid. So as you can see, I was forming balls in my hand off camera, and what you do is you put them at the bottom of the container and then you press them down, and doing this ensures that there's no air pockets. It's crucial not to have air pockets in your fermentation vessel surrounding the miso, because the more air you have, more air contact, the bigger the chances that you're going to have mold and things like this. And we really want to avoid that as much as possible. So as you can see, I'm pressing it down very well. Don't be shy. Also, you want to make sure that the container you're using is fully sterilized before, of course. And the way you do that is you can boil water and pour hot, boiling water inside, and swirl it around, keep it in the container for a couple minutes. What you can also do is use a very high percentage alcohol, grain alcohol. So not any alcohol, it really has to be alcohol you can drink that's not poisonous. So basically you can put that on a paper towel and rub the sides inside and on the opening. That basically would kill the bacteria that could have been in there. I recommend, washing with hot water, good soap, a very good rinse, and just before you use it for the recipe, you swab it with alcohol just to make sure that it's super safe. So once you've placed all your miso, you want to put a cling film on top of the miso to make sure that there's the least amount of air contact as possible. So you can see it's actually quite difficult to make it. My cling film is terrible, so it was very difficult to make it hold on the sides of the glass jar as well as the miso itself. So I ended up, having to use 2 pieces. And then on top of that, we'll be adding weights, and the weights are going to be helping with reducing the contact with air as well. the weights that I have right now at home, they're not very heavy, honestly, so they were made for smaller jars, and so they're not very heavy, and I have to use them as well as having an extra weight, which comes, for me, in my case, I just filled up a freezer bag full of old rice that I wasn't going to cook and old beans that were not going to be good if I cooked them. Like the kind of stuff that you don't feel bad leaving in a bag for a year, or how many months you're gonna ferment your miso. So I kept the same weight from my previous batch of miso that I made last year, and of course I still wasn't gonna cook with them, so I used the same bag that I also washed just before putting in there, and that should be enough to help reducing as much as possible the contact with air. And what's going to happen through the months of fermentation is pretty much inevitably you're going to have a bit of mold, and that's normal, that's okay. If the mold is white, it's fine. The top of your miso is going to become darker than the bottom, and starting 3 months of fermentation and more, you can actually start eating it. You can just scrape the top, you throw it out, whatever the top was, if it was discolored or if it was moldy, you just throw it out. And then you put a new cling film with a new sprinkle of salt on top every time you remove some. And that's it.